On February 28, 2026, the captain of the supertanker Cosmic Glory received a notification. The war risk insurance for his vessel's transit through the Strait of Hormuz had just jumped from $200,000 to over $1 million for a single voyage. This wasn't a physical blockade by mines or warships, at least not at first. Instead, within 39 hours of escalating military actions in the region, the invisible hand of the insurance market slams shut this vital artery, plunging global energy markets into chaos. This rapid commercial shutdown, triggered by a wave of US and Israeli airstrikes on Iranian nuclear and military sites, demonstrated the sheer overwhelming leverage of geography in the global economy. For 48 hours after those initial strikes, the world watched as the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage barely 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, transformed from a critical trade route into a choke point of fear and financial risk. This was not a hypothetical what if. This was a real dated event where commercial shipping, essential for moving the world's energy, largely ground to a halt. Before the conflict, approximately 20 million barrels of crude oil and other petroleum products transited this waterway every single day. That's roughly 1/4 of all seaborne oil traded globally, a staggering volume that fuels industries and transportation across the planet. So, what happened when the commercial world decided the risk was too great? The consequences were immediate, dramatic, and a stark reminder of how interconnected the global economy truly is. I dug through the numbers so you don't have to, and it comes down to a sudden, enormous surge in the hidden costs of global trade, oil prices, freight rates, and the astronomical jump in insurance premium. The Strait of Hormuz is more than just a line on a map. It is the world's most critical maritime choke point for energy. It connects the Persian Gulf, home to some of the world's largest oil and natural gas producers, to the open ocean. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran rely almost entirely on this narrow passage for their exports. At its most constricted point, the strait is only 29 nautical miles wide, about 33 miles, with just two 2-mile-wide shipping lanes for inbound and outbound traffic. This geographical bottleneck means that even minor disruptions can have outsized effects. There are some bypass pipelines, primarily for Saudi Arabian crude, but they cannot handle the vast majority of the 20 million barrels per day that typically flow through the strait. This inherent geographical constraint means that the countries bordering the Persian Gulf were dealt a specific hand. They have immense energy wealth, but it must pass through this single vulnerable channel to reach global markets. The spark that ignited this commercial shutdown on February 28, 2026, was a series of coordinated US and Israeli airstrikes targeting Iranian nuclear and military sites. This was a significant escalation in an already tense regional standoff. The attacks led to immediate retaliation from Iran, including missile and drone strikes on US bases and regional allies. In the midst of this rapidly unfolding conflict, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps declared the Strait of Hormuz closed until further notice, citing what it described as the end of US interference in the region after firing a warning shot at a commercial vessel it deemed was using an unapproved route on July 11, 2026. While a full, physical blockade by Iran did not immediately materialize, the declaration, coupled with the rising kinetic activity, was enough to trigger a different kind of closure, a commercial one. The first and most immediate effect was a seismic shift in the cost of maritime insurance. Before the conflict escalated on February 28, 2026, the war risk premium for vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz stood at around 0.2% of a vessel's hull value. Within just 48 hours of the initial airstrikes, this rate surged fivefold, climbing to 1% of the whole value. For a modern very large crude carrier, a VLCC valued at $100 million, this meant the cost of war risk coverage for a single voyage through the strait jumped from roughly $200,000 to approximately $1 million. That's an $800,000 increase per transit in a matter of hours. This dramatic repricing was not merely an inconvenience, it was a commercial ultimatum. Standard marine hull and cargo insurance policies explicitly exclude losses from war, terrorism, or military action. Shipowners must purchase separate war risk insurance to operate legally and financially. When those premiums become prohibitively expensive, or when insurers simply terminate existing coverage with 72-hour notices, as they did in this case, vessels cannot operate. This sudden astronomical increase in insurance costs had a chilling effect. Within 48 hours of the February 28, 2026 strikes, tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz collapsed by more than 80%. This was not due to Iranian warships physically blocking the lanes, but because the commercial preconditions for transit had vanished. Without affordable insurance, shipping companies simply could not afford or were unwilling to send their vessels into such a high-risk zone. The financial risk, amplified by the perceived threat of attack, became the de facto closure. Satellite navigation systems were disrupted, further adding to the uncertainty and risk for mariners. It was a clear demonstration of how the structural logic of global commerce can be weaponized, effectively shutting down a vital artery without a shot needing to be fired at every passing ship. The immediate commercial shutdown translated directly into a shockwave across global energy markets. On March 2, 2026, just 2 days after the initial strikes, U.S. oil prices rose 6.3%, settling at $71.23 per barrel. The international benchmark, Brent crude, saw an even sharper increase, jumping 6.7% to $77.74 per barrel. Analysts quickly began projecting Brent crude prices to push past $80 per barrel, with some warning of $90 or even beyond if the conflict escalated further or damaged oil infrastructure. By early March 2026, crude prices had surged to $100 a barrel, a critical psychological threshold, and briefly spiked above $120 a barrel, marking their highest levels in nearly 30 years. These aren't abstract figures. A $10 per barrel increase in crude oil can translate to roughly a 25-cent rise per gallon at the U.S. gas pump within about 20 days, impacting every American driver. Beyond gasoline, higher oil prices raised the cost of nearly everything, from manufacturing to transportation, feeding into broader inflationary pressures across the globe. The ripple effects extended far beyond just crude oil. Global supply chains, already strained by other geopolitical events, faced new pressures. Container freight rates, which dictate the cost of shipping everything from electronics to clothing, also surged. Over the first 2 months of the conflict, from February to April 2026, Trans-Pacific container rates climbed by $1,000 per 40-foot equivalent unit, a 50% increase. Specifically, spot rates from Asia to the U.S. West Coast rose 29% since the end of February 2026. By July 2026, Shanghai Los Angeles rates were up 59% from late February, reaching $3,473 per 40-foot container, while Shanghai, New York rates jumped 66% to $4,597. Even transatlantic routes, seemingly far removed from the Strait of Hormuz, felt the pinch, with Rotterdam, New York rates jumping 25% in April 2026. This surge was driven by soaring fuel costs and the sheer uncertainty in the market as carriers sought emergency bunker surcharges to cover the increased operational expenses. The United States has long maintained a strategic interest in the free flow of commerce through the Strait of Hormuz. This interest is upheld by a robust naval presence in the Middle East, primarily through the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet. As of July 28, 2026, the U.S. Central Command reported the deployment of over 20 ships in the region, specifically to support military operations and enforce a blockade against Iran, particularly around the Strait of Hormuz and Iranian ports. This substantial naval commitment includes aircraft carriers and destroyers. In May 2026, 2 U.S. Navy destroyers, the USS Truxtun and USS Mason, transited the Strait of Hormuz, navigating what officials described as an Iranian barrage of small boats, missiles, and drones. Despite these coordinated threats, vessels were not struck, demonstrating the ongoing resolve to maintain freedom of navigation in this critical waterway. This naval presence is a constant factor in the region's geopolitical landscape, a testament to the high stakes involved for global energy security. The saga of the Strait of Hormuz in late February and early March of 2026 is a stark lesson in the enduring power of geography. Even without a full physical blockade, the immediate and overwhelming commercial shutdown, triggered by rapidly rising war risk insurance premiums and a collapse in tanker traffic, demonstrated the strait's immense inherent leverage. Countries are dealt a hand by their geography, and in this case, the narrow gate of Hormuz ensures that even a brief, effective closure can send real, measurable shockwaves across global markets, proving that the world's dependence on this single choke point is as profound as ever. As of August 2026, the situation remains highly volatile, with ongoing naval blockades and renewed hostilities continuing to disrupt oil flows and keep prices elevated, a persistent reminder of geography's relentless influence. The world's economy, it turns out, is only as resilient as its narrowest choke points. U.S. retailers like Walmart and Amazon, now paying hundreds more per container, initiated emergency air freight for electronics and apparel. This costly mechanism, up to 10 times sea rates, prevented stockouts but fueled inflation. By May 2026, American consumers paid an average of $110 more monthly for imported goods. The most striking fact? Over 80% of global trade relies on ocean shipping. The world's economy is only as resilient as its narrowest choke points. U.S. retailers like Walmart and Amazon, paying hundreds more per container, initiated emergency air freight for electronics and apparel. By May 2026, American consumers paid $110 more monthly for imported goods. Subscribe to TradeWind, and the next video is waiting for you on screen right now.